Hello and welcome everyone. We're excited to welcome you to our Veeam Data Platform Security Best Practices session. My name is Nikita. I'm part of the system engineering team within the renewals and customer success department at Veeam Software. And I'm joined today by Pavel, and together we'll guide you through the key security practices that help protect your data in the modern threat landscape. Pavel, would you like to introduce yourselves?
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Nikita. So first of all, welcome everyone. We're happy to have you here. We will try to make the session as easy to understand as possible. And I really believe that it should be helpful for all of us. Please be engaged, ask your questions, and let's start.
All right, thank you. Before we get started, just a couple of quick housekeeping notes. So this session is being recorded and you will receive the recording just in a few days. And also we want this session to be as interactive as possible. So at any time, please feel free to ask your questions and we'll try to answer them on the go. And for that, use the question box to submit your questions and take full advantage of this live interaction. So let's do it. And here is our roadmap for today. So we have structured the session around the key security risks and the strategies to mitigate them. And Pavel and I will be switching between each other as we move from one risk to the next. So, you'll get different perspectives and a more complete view of the whole topic. A really quick note about the materials. So this slide deck includes a lot of links to materials, to articles, to best practice guides, and other resources that you can explore after the session. You'll also get a PDF copy of that deck, so keep an eye on your inbox. And that way, you'll have everything we covered today, so plus some extra resources ready for your revisit at any time. And well, with that, I'll hand it over to Pavel to kick off our first topic.
Thank you, Nikita. So let's start. First of all, it's really important to know that a lot of companies really feel ready until incident exposes the real gaps. Actually, confidence without verification is a liability, not a strength. That's important. We can also convert our belief into evidence by running multiple drills on a timely basis. Uh, and we should understand whether outcomes match expectations under the pressure. Um, I can say that during the time, I mean, for let's say at certain points, you will find that your readiness decays if it's not maintained well. So this approach should be constant. Like you should have scheduled tests, you should verify the findings, and you should understand how to resolve any issues um, you will get during the um, testing, during the drills, and so on. Actually, about the size, a lot of people really think that it's only about the large enterprises. But in fact, it's not for quite long period already, because a lot of common things can be automated. Actually, attackers can automate early phases like scanning and phishing at scale quite well, and they probably will prefer to go after many good enough companies, good enough targets, rather than few heavily defended ones. That's really important nowadays. The same time, smaller organizations often have limited security staffing and slower patch cycles. So actually, this also exposes more, let's say, exposes more vulnerabilities. For example, attackers can use semi-closed doors, like for example, some issues in the software, some human layer vulnerabilities, like for example, repetitive credentials. I mean, reused credentials, or for example, phishing to find the proper login and password to log into your perimeter, and so on. What's important for attackers? It's really useful to attack smaller organizations because they understand that with fewer hands on deck, incident response most likely will take much more or even can stall. Means that there is a higher chance of paying ransom, and maybe just, let's say, organization will suffer will suffer from extended downtime. So actually, that also means a lot for them. So actually, as a conclusion for this slide, it's important to understand that if you are in quite small organization, like for example, under 100 count of employees, you are still at risk because nowadays it doesn't really important how large your company is. Every company of every size is under the crosshair. That's important. Okay, regarding the um, how attackers can gain access. Um, Social engineering still stays the most effective because it targets people and process gaps. So actually, it's quite easy and quite fast to gain an access by um, obtaining credentials through the phishing, or maybe to use unpatched vulnerabilities. Because attackers doing this constantly. Actually, they are scanning all the time, and where the gap between vulnerability disclosure and remediation of this vulnerability, they can use this moment to gain access to your secured perimeter. That's highly important. Um, Additionally, there are multiple misconfiguration issues that can help attackers to gain access. Like, for example, sometimes they can use VPNs or remote protocols like RDP, etc. And sometimes these techniques allow them to land exactly at the secured part of your network, because they can bypass the, let's say, the outer perimeter of your defenses and get right behind the walls. That's super important as well. And the last but not least, shadow IT connections, still something that we should fight all the time, because shadow IT allows attackers to get inside, uh, and they can do this without without being um, spotted or without any, let's say, logs in your system, because shadow IT, um, it doesn't follow the control principles we are using in organizations. Actually, shadow IT allows you to do a lot of things without any trails, and that's super important. Okay, regarding the process, actually, all the things always started with recon, then attackers trying to get an access, and escalate privileges. Actually, the first part, the access can be automated or semi-automated at least. So actually, they will not do this manually. They will just react when something happened, when some person provided them with credentials by responding on phishing email and so on. And actually, they will start mapping the targets, mapping the resources, escalating privileges, and so on. Actually, that's the first two parts are quite important. And what's also important, if you will be able to notice the presence of bad guys in your environment, at the earlier stages, it will be less harmful to your organization. That's super important. The earlier you will find the something happens, the better you will be on a later stage. Um, Second part, dwell time, means attackers will probably exfiltrate your data, so means steal your data, and they will try to leverage privileges, escalate privileges, try to find some where you store your data, where is your backups, try to understand your environment as much as they can. Second step, pre-encryption, means they will try to make it much more difficult for you to recover after attack. So ideally, they will try to stop backup services. They will try to delete backups. They can remove some snapshots from your storage systems. Maybe they will be able to find your remote sites, delete replicas, stop replication processes, and so on. Actually, everything to prevent your ability to restore and recover from these actions. And the last one, that's like a key. They are they will start most likely encrypting your data to ask for a ransom, of course. And most of the time, this happens during the holidays um, when let's say your IT staff is not on site or they are not fully present there. Like for example, uh, just one person out of five there, and so on. Actually, it's better for them to do it when no one can notice. That's highly important for them, of course. Okay, today we will discuss multiple different risks, and actually all of them are split into three main buckets. First bucket called infrastructure security, second one data security, and third one operational security. Infrastructure risks are about the control of backup and management plane. So actually, if attacker owns the management layer, they can do whatever they want to. So it's highly important to be able to secure your management layer, and we will discuss how we can achieve this. Data risks cover the backups and your production data. So it means encryption of your data, deletion of your data, silent tampering of your data. So actually, this can turn the recovery plan into pain because you will be unable to do almost anything if your data is corrupted, encrypted, deleted, etc. And the last one, operational risks are about people, processes, bad changes, misconfigurations, staying unalerted, unclear roles, or missing the rehearsal, for example. So actually, that's all about things we are doing daily and how we are doing these things. So let's start with the very first one, backup server compromise. That's the most obvious and probably the first thing that comes to mind when we're talking about backup and security, right? So that's how we and why we should protect our backup server. Actually, backup server, that's your resiliency control plane. If attacker will be able to get an access, they can do whatever they want. We can also check how exactly this should look like on a later stage. What's important? Actually, there are multiple ways how they get inside. First of all, that's a human factor, of course. So that's phishing, that's reused credentials, that's let's say escalated privileges, that's vulnerabilities as well. What's important about vulnerabilities? It's not a failure to let's say to have a vulnerabilities. It's absolutely fine. So I can say that actually in every single product uh, at some point has some vulnerabilities, and that's absolutely a normal process of product development. The worst thing that if these vulnerabilities are untracked and unpatched, that means trouble because that's exactly the time when attacker can get in by exploiting these vulnerabilities. What's important here? So we are dealing with vulnerabilities quite seriously, and um, we have a vulnerability disclosure program available for everyone, and we are let's say we are explaining that at some points we have some vulnerabilities in our products. It can be because of dependencies, and can be due to variety of different reasons, but still, it's important to be clear and constant to have clear communications, and we are committed to constant improvement. Actually, how you can find what exactly can you improve or patch in our products? We have a dedicated place where you can find all the security issues and vulnerabilities we have in our products. Uh, as we already discussed at the very beginning, uh, this presentation has a lot of links inside. So there's just a green bold text with an underline. Uh, you will be able to follow these links to research a little bit deeper. And actually, you will find exactly this page by following the security advisory list link. And actually, you can find every vulnerabilities we have in our products, and you can subscribe to this list. You can do this in two different ways. The first one is to use your email, and you will be able to receive weekly summary about new updates, about new vulnerabilities, and you will be able to timely patch our products. Second option is to use RSS. So you can use the feed to instantly receive all the updates. So that's up to you. You can use one way or another. So the first one will be a little bit slower with more gap between the disclosure and let's say to your action. And the second one will be a little bit faster, but it depends on your preferences. Um, okay, next one. So how it looks from the outside. Of course, if you're using Veeam, you have your management server and you have sub roles. It can be um, repositories, backup proxies, gateways, tape servers, whatever, a lot of them. The common thing that you have just one role to rule them all. That's a backup server. And that's highly value target for any attacker because by gaining an access, as you already know, they will be able to discover the location of your sub roles. Like for example, even if you have a dedicated tenant in Azure um, hidden somewhere, you can still understand what is it from the Veeam server perspective because you will be able to find the host name, you can let's say discover the IP address, and you will be able to find some sub roles you really want to find because you have an access to management plane. So it's really important to secure your backup server. Uh, Actually, as we already discussed, as attackers most likely will try to stop your backup services, will stop your jobs when they will gain an access. Also, they can steal sensitive data in from your backups because just imagine your organization, you have production data spread out everywhere, but when it comes to important data, most likely you will backup it, right? So actually all of your important data already here in your repositories, and that's the most obvious thing attackers can do. They can steal your data if it's not encrypted or if your encryption password is compromised or brute forced, whatever. Like you should understand this. So it's highly, highly important to secure your backup server. And we have a um, set of steps that can help you along this way. So the first one and the most obvious one will be to use our security and compliance analyzer. This feature is built into our management console of Veeam Backup and Replication. And that's not a solution, actually. That's just a good starting point for you on your hardening journey, because it's not just, let's say, one time thing. So you should constantly check what's happening with your backup environment and adjust some things to let's say to make it secure all the time. Um, how it looks like. If you'll click on it, it will launch uh, the, the automated check procedure, and you will have a list of checks that are passed or let's say not implemented or not applicable and so on. And actually, that's a good starting point. As I already mentioned, you can verify what you can implement without any issues, or maybe what steps could take more time for you because of different reasons. Probably because it should be uh, it requires agreement with different departments in the organization and so on. Actually, that's different for every single organization. But the main direction here is it's quite easy to understand what you could improve right here and right now. Actually, if these bullets are not that descriptive that a little bit less descriptive that you want, you can actually check the detailed description in our help center. Of course, this link again, you can click on it and you will be able to read all the descriptions in our help center. Additionally, there is a PowerShell script that can help you automate all the implementations. Okay, that's still PowerShell. Like you can open it, you can check what's inside, you can check what will be happening when you launch it, and of course, you can verify it before it will be launched because it should be safe, right, for you. So actually, we build it to use it or not. That's your choice. But of course, it can simplify a lot of things for you because like it can be just launched and it will take like a couple of minutes to run, and then you will see much greener picture in this list because it will change a lot of things automatically. But okay, that's up to you. You can use it or you can do it manually. The most obvious recommendations you can follow. First of all, we see a lot of customers who are using Veeam Backup and Replication Server as a part of Active Directory domain. That's a significant security attack surface because, again, if domain credentials, administrative domain credentials will be compromised, um, attackers can easily gain an access to your Vim backup and replication server. Of course, that's something that you probably want to avoid at all costs. And it's better to have it just as a part of, let's say, normal work group, not domain joined, because it's much, much safer. Second point, you can use multi-factor authentication. That's limits the access to VBR console. We will cover this a little bit later in details, but just keep in mind that MFA, that's something we are using almost everywhere nowadays. And why not to use it for your high value environment, like a backup environment? So actually, that's something that we can highly recommend to all of you because it's so easy to implement and it's kind of easy to use, and it adds a lot of complexity in terms of gaining access, unauthorized access to your backup server. Second thing, that's four eyes authorization, and this also a big thing. So actually, four eyes allows you to it requires a second person confirmation or verification of sensitive actions. For example, if someone really want to delete some backups or they want to disconnect your backup repository, in this case, Veeam will raise an alert for second administrator, and it will be required to confirm that these actions are valid and it's not, let's say, they are not comes from let's say attacker, bad guy, etc. So actually that's also super important. Next one, called security officer. That's a new one. Probably you know that soon we will release Veeam software appliance. It's a Linux based implementation of Veeam backup and replication, and it will offer feature called security officer. Actually, it's kind of similar to four eyes authorization, but with, let's say, some differences. Actually, security officer should be assigned to, let's say, to a person maybe from security department, and they will not be able to do anything other than approve or reject your sensitive operations. And that's the main goal of this. So actually, you can enable it from the very beginning or disable. That's up to you. But of course, if you have a large organization and you have a dedicated security department, it's really nice to have this feature on. Okay, and the last one, that's kind of common mistake across our customers. So it's highly recommended to disable remote protocols like RDP. Because if you're using RDP, there is a high chance that attacker, again, by gaining credentials, they will be able to log in and disable services delete some local data, and so on. Actually, it's not really reliable to use an RDP to VBR server. It's much better to have our console, remote console, installed locally on your laptop, for example, or you can use dedicated server for this. Again, the server where you don't have running Veeam backup services. That's important. So it's nice to always not to have RDP enabled, or in as a worst case, you should restrict an access from specific IP addresses or use network level authentication just to make it a little bit safer, because RDP is still high risk protocol. So that's the most common things you can implement. And actually, I can say that implementing all of these will not take a lot of your time. So it's really, really worth it. That's just the beginning. Like you can start with this and you can continue with everything left on your Veeam compliance, Veeam security and compliance analyzer as a red marks. So actually you can go one to another and fix all of them. Okay, regarding how it looks in interface. We have a really, really nice node regarding for eyes authorization. Actually, you can see that this functionality cannot protect against hackers with privileged access to backup infrastructure. So it means that it can protect your backup environment only in terms of access to management console in a, let's say, semi-legit way. Like if they have an access to server itself, Four Eyes would not help you at all because like you cannot do anything with it. Um, okay, and the second part, we have MFA. There's one important note about MFA. It cannot be enabled for groups. So actually, if you have a group and let's say specific users added to list of Vim users, it's important to enable it and then remove groups, because in case if you have specific administrator as a part of the group also added to this list, MFA wouldn't work, unfortunately. So just leave your administrator accounts and that's it. And actually, it's kind of easy. So when you will enable it, the next login, all the users will have to set up their MFAs. So they will have to scan QR code. It will be added to application of your choice, and then it's like a regular MFA. So you will have to enter PIN every time you will log in into the management console. Okay, next one. Again, security officer. We already discussed this briefly. Actually, that will how it will look. That's text user interface of our VSA, Veeam software appliance. And actually, you can enable it at the very beginning when you're setting up the system, or you can disable it. It can't. It's impossible to, let's say, to disable it when you have already your system running. So you should decide it at the very beginning. Okay, that's the major one. I can say that's a sort of a core in terms of security measures you can take. It's highly important to be sure that that you see all the things that are happening regarding your security perimeter or your backup environment. So there is a special software that's it called Security Information and Event Management. And actually, we have integrations with some of our partners like CrowdStrike, Fortinet, Palo Alto Networks, and so on. Actually, you can check the list on our help center and how it can help you. The main goal of these type of software, it allows you to correlate things that happens across your environment. So actually, for example, imagine that you have a sort of, let's say, alert, like new admin logged in from unfamiliar IP address. Does it make sense? Maybe some admin joining from VPN. Maybe they have let's say, new device and using old credentials, admin credentials on a new device. So, and this device was assigned with the new IP address by DHCP. So actually, that's quite common thing. But what if you will, let's say, if you configure this to alert you when new admin logins from new IP address, then you have a number of backups or snapshot deletions, and then you have egress spike. Like this means a lot already. So it means that someone tried to steal your data and delete your backups. So these can, so in this case, you should act fast. And it's really important to be alerted about this. Again, that's not enough. So if you will just receive some alerts, that's good. Already, that's much better than not to see anything. But you should make these alerts actionable. Like you should define owners who and how will respond on this and that alert. Uh, it's ideally to have a sort of playbooks, so predefined steps, like for example, what should be isolated in case of breach, what should be done in terms of, let's say, second type of alert, and so on. Actually, you can think about it. There's a multiple sources where you can find a lot of recommendations. There are best practices how it should be done. So actually, you can find a lot of information. And actually, we have a blog post. It's called 10 Critical Alarms to Stop Ransomware. And you can find the link on top of on top right corner of the slide. So it's clickable. You will be able to follow it when you receive your PDF version. So actually, it's extremely useful um, group of tools that allow you to see what's really happening. Okay, um, so the next one. Um, just imagine that you tried to do your best, but still failed in terms of backup server defense. So it was breached, it was stopped, backup jobs were stopped, services were stopped, maybe some database, Veeam internal database was corrupted or deleted, server was restarted, or maybe some services deleted. So you cannot restart it. It doesn't work. You should prepare yourself for this scenario because Veeam allows you to create configuration backup in a scheduled manner. So you can just configure this type of job in Vim interface, and you will be able to restore your backup server configuration when it's needed. One important note: it's highly important to practice restoring your configuration before the bad day, because it should be a sort of like muscle memory, not the guesswork, especially under stress. And the second part of this recommendation, you really should understand how long it will take to restore your configuration. Because, for example, if you are using file to tape jobs, or you have a lot of jobs, it will store. So these type of jobs will store a lot of data in database, and it will require quite long period to restore all this data back to the database of a new of clean Vim installation. So actually, just practice in advance. That's highly important, and do this regularly. Like for example, at least once couple of months, because you should understand what exact time you should spend on these actions. And the last one, but not the least one, it's important to remember that in case of a security breach, attackers most likely will try um, to encrypt your data for a ransom. But additionally, it's highly popular to steal your data. It can increase the leverage over you because you are risking to get a reputational damage, regulatory penalties, and so on. Actually, if they will expose the data publicly, this means that you are, let's say, you, you accepted let's say you confirm the privacy breach, because that will be obviously that's your data, because there is a multiple ways how you can link the data to specific organization. So just to prevent this, it's highly important to use some specific tools we have in our product, like indicator of compromise tool scanner, and for example, Threat Hunter. That's a sort of like a highly recommended tools. Additionally, of course, all the data should be encrypted at rest and in transfer. So when it's transferred from one part of your backup environment, from your production environment to, for example, proxy, to repository, all this data should be encrypted all the time, because it will make much more difficult to steal this data. Okay, I hope this was understandable. We will get back to some of these tools and methods. And now back to Nikita.
Absolutely, thank you. Um, Now let's talk about risk number two, and that is backup data encryption or deletion. And this is not a minor issue. This is one of the most critical failure points in modern data protection, actually. And we like to think of backups as our last line of defense. But attackers know this too, and that's why they target the backups first. In fact, research shows that nearly 90% of organizations have had their backup repos targeted, and over a third actually lost backup data due to modification or complete destruction. And well, why is this so dangerous? Well, because if your backups are gone, your recovery plan is gone. And if your production environment is, let's say, compromised at the very same time, you're left with no safety net. And that is why protecting backup data is not optional. It must be treated as a core element of your security strategy with the same or even greater high level of protection as your production environment. Let's unpack what actually happens when an attacker goes after your backups and how resiliency domains stop them. So picture this. We have the threat actor, we have the attacker, and the attacker is already inside your network. Maybe they got in through a phishing email. Maybe they have using stolen admin creds, or maybe they exploited some unpatched operating system. And they start moving laterally, staying quiet, staying under the radar, mapping your infrastructure step by step. And then they find the backup server, and from their perspective, this is key to the kingdom. They can see every backup job, every repo, every recovery point your business relies on. And if they compromise that machine, they can disable jobs, they can delete recovery points, and make sure that when the ransomware detonates in the production, there is literally nothing left to recover from. um, and they don't stop there. So they can go straight for your backup repos on premises or in the cloud, again using exploits, vulnerabilities, or stolen credentials to delete, to wipe your backup data completely. And this is exactly where resiliency domains change the game. Well, instead of a single easy target, they now face multiple isolated systems, each with separate credentials, hardened operating systems, and immutability that they, well, hopefully can't bypass. And now instead of breaking just one door, they have to crack multiple vaults, each one buying your time to detect and to respond the incident. And next, let's see how the so-called 3-to-1 rule fits into this model to give you even stronger and layered defense. So the 3-to-1 design rule is one of the simplest yet most effective principles in backup strategy. Keep at least 3 copies of your data, store them on 2 different types of media, and have at least 1 copy offsite. Why is this so critical? Well, it is simple because it eliminates a single point of failure. If your primary backup repo is compromised, whether by ransomware, hardware failure, or even by a human mistake, you still have the other independent copies to recover from. So here on the left, you see our production environment. We back it up and we store the data in the primary backup repository, which is usually on site for speed and for fast recovery. But that is only the first layer. So to truly meet the 3-to-1 rule, we need to add extra isolated copies that live in different locations. So even if one is compromised, others remain untouched. And now let's explore what those additional layers can look like. And well, one way to meet the offsite requirement is with a remote site backup repository in a completely separate physical location. So if something happens to your main site, whether it's a fire, flood, or cyber incident, your backups remain safe, far from the danger zone. Another option is tape libraries. Yes, they may feel old school a bit, but they still remain one of the most secure and truly air-gapped solutions for long-term retention and ransomware defenses. No hacker can encrypt a tape that is sitting offline in a vault, hidden. And of course, we have the cloud repo. So whether it is Veeam Data Cloud Vault or any other public cloud object storage, giving you offsite resilience, uh, geographic separation, and the option to enable immutability directly in the cloud using object lock or any other technologies. So the key here is diversity. By spreading your backups across different locations and media, you make it exponentially harder for an attacker or for any event, be it a cyber attack, hardware failure, or even a natural disaster, to wipe out every backup copy that you have. So let's imagine this. An attacker breaches your primary site. So within, let's say, hours, both your production data and your main backup repo are encrypted. And if that is your only copy, that's game over. You're done. So no recovery, no safety net, just downtime, data loss, and well, a very bad day for the business. And this is where a Veeam backup copy job changed the game. And this kind of job creates additional independent copies or instances of your backup data in a completely different location. Maybe a remote site, maybe a cloud repo, you name it. And the beauty is, if you don't have to rerun the original backup job. You simply select the workloads you want to protect, either from existing backup jobs or directly from the repositories, and then you choose your target location. You set your retention policy that may differ from the original backup job, and let Vim handle the rest. The key here is automation. So that process runs on schedule in the background and without relying on somebody to remember to trigger that process. So even if your primary backups are gone, your secondary isolated copies remain untouched. They are ready to recover and they are completely out of reach from, let's say, from the attacker. Now let's talk about one of the most powerful defenses against backup encryption or deletion, and that is immutability. And think of it as putting your backups in a time-locked vault. So once immutability is enabled, your data is frozen in a read-only state for a defined period. So it can't be changed, it can't be deleted, it can't be encrypted. Again, not by attackers and not even by an admin with full access. And that is this is the ultimate safeguard, not just against ransomware, but also against accidental deletion or malicious insider actions. And the best part with Veeam, immutability is flexible. I mean, you can have it on our own hardened repo. We'll cover later on for on premises, in the Veeam Data Cloud Vault, or with public object storages like Amazon, Azure, or Google, or even with enterprise backup storage systems like HP StoreOnce and Dell EMC Data Domain. So no matter where your backups live, on premises, in the cloud, or in a hybrid setup, we can make them immutable. And well, because in today's threat landscape, at least one of your backup repos must be immutable if you want true recovery assurance. Um, let's walk through the timeline as if it was a real incident. So it's the 1st of January. A new recovery point is created, and the moment it lands in the hardened repository, it is locked, immutable for, let's say, 45 days. And from that second, the backup is frozen, so no one can modify it and no one can delete it. January 27th, so the attacker strikes. And okay, let's assume the production is already encrypted and now they go after the backups. But it doesn't work because immutability blocks every change on the repository. February 14, the immutability period expires, and now the file system, if we speak about the hardened repo, about the XFS file system, the file system allows modifications or deletions of the recovery points. But at this point, the threat is gone and the incident is already under the control. And on March the 1st, according to your retention policy, the restore point is deleted or merged. And this is the planned lifecycle management on your schedule, but not on the attackers. And well, nowadays, immutability is not just a nice to have, it's a time locked vault for your backups. And again, in modern ransomware defense, they can be the difference between a fast and clean recovery and a complete business shutdown. All right, so we know why immutability is critical, but the big question is how do we actually make it real? And the answer is the hardened repository. And this is not just another storage target. It's not just another backup repository. It is secure, hardened storage with immutability built in. So even if an attacker gains admin access to your backup server, they still can't delete, change, or encrypt those backups until the immutability period expires. And that's a game changer because in modern ransomware attacks, backups are often the first target. Flexibility is the key, and with Veeam you can build a hardened repo on generic Linux, so you're not locked into a specific hardware configuration or appliance. You can choose the hardware you want and the Linux distribution that fits your standards: Ubuntu, Debian, Red Hat, SUSE, Rocky, and more. Definitely, there are some requirements for the repo, both for the standard Veeam repository ones and some extra for hardened mode, things like local Linux accounts, no SSH access, and others. And if we speak about deployment, you can deploy it yourself using a special hardened script from Veeam, or use the Veeam hardened repository ISO. And well, the core idea behind this repo, even if the Veeam backend replication server is compromised, backups on the immutable hardened repo remain untouchable. So, as Pavel already mentioned, the next release is coming. And in the next release of Veeam Data Platform, we're introducing something I'm really excited about, and that's just enough operating system. This is a minimal security optimized Linux build delivered as an ISO or OVA, designed specifically for Veeam roles like hardened repo, Veeam backend replication management machine, proxies, and others. And it is based on Rocky Linux and comes pre-hardened with a disasstic security profile. And that means from the very first boot, you start with a system that is already locked down, it is production ready, and you don't have to spend time hardening it yourself. It takes like 10 minutes to deploy that virtual machine or a physical one from the ISO or from OVA. So it is really fast. The security patching is fully automated by Veeam, and MFA is mandatory for access. So in short, the operating system itself becomes part of your security strategy, not just the storage layer. It is minimal, it is hardened, and it's purpose built to protect your backups from day one. So with immutable backups, once the backup lands in the repository, it is locked for some period of time. So you define it. Maybe it's 14, 30, or 45 days. And during that time, even if someone has admin creds, they cannot delete, modify, encrypt those files. It doesn't matter if it's a ransomware, a rock admin, or just an accidental click. Those are untouchable. And we harden that repository by cutting off unnecessary access, like disabling SSH and other management protocols, turning it into an air-gapped black box. So the backups come in to that box, but nothing can change them without real physical access to the hardware. And we also use single-use credentials for backup processes and completely remove the root access because we don't need it when we work with a hardened repo. So even if your main Veeam backup replication server is compromised, those credentials can't be reused to log in and mess with the backup data because we don't store them in the configuration database. And this is a huge safeguard against insider threats we cover on later and credential theft. And here's the bonus. If you pair this up with the XFS file system, you get a block cloning. And that means faster synthetic full backups, less disk usage, and better performance. So you're not just getting security, you're getting efficiency in one package with a hardened repo. And the great thing is, you can use immutability seamlessly with SOBR with a scale out backup repository. Think of SOBR as a flexible multi-tier storage system for your backups. It's not just a single repo. It's a logical grouping of multiple storage types that can scale and adapt as you need it, as your needs evolve. So let's start from the top. We start with a performance tier. Fast primary storage like direct attached drives, enterprise storage arrays, maybe NAS, or even S3 compatible appliances. And this is where your most recent backups live for quick recovery. Then on top of that, we add the capacity tier. That is a public cloud object storage or the Veeam Vault. And this extends your backup storage offsite, giving you additional resilience against local disasters or even targeted attacks. And finally, the last layer, that is the archive tier, and that one built for long-term retention at the lowest possible cost. And for that, we're using services like Amazon Glacier or Azure Archive Storage. And the beauty of SOBR is scalability and diversity. So if one tier is compromised, the others remain untouched. And with immutability enabled on any of the tiers, you get another layer of protection that attackers simply can't bypass. So from operational standpoint, it is managed as a single target. And from a security standpoint, it is a multiple independent vaults working together to protect your data. Next, let's quickly zoom in on the first layer of our SOBR, and that is the performance tier. So this tier is made up of one or more backup repos, and we call them extents. And these extents operate as a single scalable backup target, so you can add storage anytime with no downtime, and no need to change your existing backup jobs, existing backup policies. From a security perspective, extents in the performance tier can be hardened repos with immutability, and that means even the most recent backups, and well, the ones you'd likely need first in a recovery, are fully protected. It's built for speed, whether you need a full virtual machine recovery, file level recovery, or let's say database instant recovery. And it is seamlessly connected to the capacity tier. So you can configure it so older backups can be offloaded automatically for longer term retention. So at this level, you get the best of both worlds. You get the fast recovery and the first line of ransomware defense through immutability. And now let's quickly jump to the second layer of our SOBR, and that is the capacity tier. So this one is built for cost-effective, longer-term retention, typically using cloud object storage. And once backups in the performance tier age pass beyond your operational restore window, say 14 days, Veeam can automatically move or copy those to the capacity tier. So no manual steps, no extra work, it just happens. From a security perspective, again, we can add immutability through object lock. So even in the cloud, your backups remain, sorry. So even in the cloud, your backups remain in a read-only state for the duration that you define. So to wrap it up, by separating the on-site performance tier from the off-site capacity one, you ensure that multiple copies of your backups live on different media and different locations automatically. And this aligns perfectly with a 3-to-1 rule that we discussed and makes it dramatically harder for an attacker to compromise all copies at once. And because the capacity tier is cloud-based, it's not directly accessible from your on-premises environment, and that gives you a built-in layer of isolation against local breaches or even insider threats. And with that, over to you, Pavel.
Thank you, Nikita. So our next risk called malware and backups. Why this is important? First of all, because restoring from an infected backup can bring the attacker right back into your production environment, causing reinfection loop and extended downtime. The goal is quite simple. You should know which restore points are clean before the crisis, and make checking for integrity parts. And it should be like a normal part of your operations. Um, so actually, we can see it on a timeline. Imagine that at some point you implemented a number of tools like file system or inline scan, or maybe Veeam Threat Hunter and YARC content analysis. And now you are feel a little bit safer because now you are checking your backups for some malware stuff inside. But at some point, there's a chance that, let's say, one of your backups will be suspected as a containing malware, or maybe it will be confirmed. So what's your actions? Actually, it's quite simple. The as a incident respect response phase, your first job to identify the most recent clean restore points. Because if you will not do this, you will cause a reinfection again in your production environment because you will restore infected backup. Actually, it can cause a lot of bad things. And let's say when you will be able to identify the latest clean restore point, it will allow you to start restoring your data without the risk of reinfection. At some point, your incident response phase will come to an end. Like, for example, you will understand where the breach was. You will restore the clean data back to your production environment, and the incident will be resolved. So this means you will continue in a continuous protection phase. So actually, everything should be good. So again, the main goal here is to identify the latest cleanest point and do not allow any kind of reinfection in your production environment. We have a number of tools to aid you with this. Actually, we have file system activity analysis. We have indicators of compromise tool scanner. These tools can help you to identify the anomalies in your backups. Actually, we can also include inline scan entropy analysis to this group as well. Um, the first and the second allows you to identify if something not not the same as on regular as always. Like we have some changes in the data, or maybe there is signs or footprints of tools that probably was used as a to breach your security. Like for example, some tools that shouldn't be there. For example, you have a let's say database server. Running Windows. And let's say there is some tools on this machine to scan ports, to access another machines via SSH, for example, and so on. Actually, this means a lot. Or maybe you have a lot of newly created files or deleted files where it shouldn't be. And actually, these all the signs of possible issues. Additionally, we have signature-based detection, Veeam Threat Hunter. This tool is quite similar to an antivirus, but it's designed in the way it should be for backups. So actually, it has more lightweight databases. It's faster. We will discuss it later, of course. But it's a really nice alternative to third-party antiviruses that you can use as well. But let's say our recommendation is to stick with Veeam Threat Hunter. Additionally, you can use YARA rules. That's rule-based detection. If you are looking for something specific, like really, really, really specific, you know what you are doing. Like you can use hex codes. You can use, let's say, sequences of data in some files to find them, to identify them. And actually, you can generate these rules by yourself, or you can use external tools. We will cover this a little bit later. And additionally, it's also possible to use third-party solutions. Like, for example, if you have security platform already in place, you can actually integrate Veeam with your security solution to mark some our machines as infected if it was detected by third-party external security platform, and Veeam will reflect this in the user interfaces just to make sure your backup admins are aware about this. So it's also a nice thing to have. Okay, when and how you can use all these tools. Actually, that's the same content as we have on the previous slide, but it just sorted out by the stage or by the right time when you should apply all these tools. Actually, during the backup job, we can use file system activity scan, indicators of compromise tool scanner, and entropy analysis. So actually, this is quite kind of lightweight scan tools, and you should use them all the time, actually, if you really care about not being, let's say, reinfected by the same malware again. Um, Additionally, on demand, you can use scan backup feature. So actually, this just asks Veeam to run Veeam Threat Hunter against some specific restore point, or to use Yara scan against the same or another restore point, and so on. And additionally, you can use Veeam Threat Hunter and Yara rules uh, while you are restoring the data. It's called secure restore. So actually, Veeam will check the data before putting this data back to your production environment. And also, you can use Veeam Threat Hunter and Yara Scan as a part of your sure backup job. Like when you have your sure backup job to verify that your backups are recoverable, you can also use extra step to check your backups with these tools. Again, just to make sure they are not, your restore points are not infected. Okay, regarding the Veeam Threat Hunter, we already um, touched it a little bit. So actually, Veeam Threat Hunter is an alternative to third-party antivirus. But why it's really recommended to use it instead of antivirus? Actually, it's kind of easier to use it because it's automatically installed on each mount server. So you don't have to install antivirus agents and to integrate them with Vim. Additionally, it's significantly faster. So if you will compare with Windows Defender, you will gain like 3 to 6 times more speed by using the same amount of CPU and RAM. So that's highly important. So same resources, but significantly faster. And you know that it's really important when it comes to crisis time. Like for example, you need to restore this as fast as you can, and you have to check the cleanest is your restore point clean or not, or maybe it's infected. So actually, every second costs a lot. And like it's obvious that it's better to use faster tool. What else? Actually, it's included. Like you don't have to pay for it. Like if you compare this to antivirus, it's really easier to use something that's already pre-installed, pre-configured, faster, and cost nothing because it's included in the data platform advanced and premium. So actually, it's really obvious for me to use this versus antivirus. And the last but not least, there is a practice that it's good to use different angles. So actually, when you use antivirus for your production data and Veeam Threat Hunter for your backups before the data will be restored on a regular basis, you will have two different sets of signatures. This means that if something was missed by one signature set, probably it will be found by another one. So actually, it's much better to have two different solutions in place rather than relying only on third-party antivirus for production and for backups as well. Okay, regarding Yara rules. Yara rules are quite powerful and quite simple to understand. So to understand the logic behind this. But actually, that's a sort of like a really, really precise tool. Like you should really understand what exactly you're looking for. Because you can create these rules manually. You can use third-party platforms to generate them. A lot of security platforms can generate this for you. And also there are some LLMs that can generate something big, let's say by using your description. And there is a special file analyzer tools that can also generate some Yara rules based on the specific content and so on. So actually, what exactly how it works? Actually, you can set a number of values. Like for example, you have a string A, like just some string that you can find within the file. Maybe you can use some hex if you will open the file with in a hex mode. You can just copy some hexes from there. You can use regex approach. So actually, you can use a sort of like a rule, like and there should be a sequence of data within the file that matches this regex. And actually, it's kind of powerful. You can also build a logic. Like, for example, you can configure that it should be match with the first thing with string A, for example, or it should be match with hex B and regex C, for example, as you can see on example. Actually, you can do a lot with this, but this is not an antivirus. This is kind of precise tool, so you should know exactly what you are looking for. Again, you can also use public repositories to find some, let's say, publicly used and popular Yara rules, or you can use generators and LLMs, as we already discussed. So that's up to you. If you're considering public repositories as a source of your Yara rules, please pay attention to the quality, because before you will implement and start use of some third-party YARA rules, it's really, really important to test it against your data just to minimize false positives. And as well, it would be nice to test it against some malicious samples because it should work. It's not there just for to be there. Yeah, again, so we are trying to find to use some tools that will help us and that will be the best match to solve our task. And again, Yara rules is about performance as well, so it's kind of fast, but you should verify that the rules and strings within the Yara rule they are following the best practices. Like for example, you are not using short strings, for example, because you will find a lot of matches. You will have a lot of false positives. You should minimize wildcards in hex strings as well. And let's say you should use regex appropriately. So that's also important. So actually, it's really, really nice what you're doing before you start using Yara rules. Again, but that's kind of powerful tool, really, really powerful. And actually, regarding all these tools, let's say let's step back. All these tools are quite powerful together. But of course, if you will, let's say, discuss all of them separately, mm, none of them are perfect alone, actually. So my recommendation is to use them all together, and only in this case you will be able to use full capabilities of them. Okay, Nikita, back to you.
Fantastic. Um, Now we have risk number four, and those are insider threats. Um, and actually, those are unique because they come from people who already have elevated privileges inside your backup infrastructure or from attackers who have compromised those privileged accounts. So, unlike external threats, insiders don't have to break through your perimeter, they already start inside your trusted zone. And when we talk about cyber threats, most people imagine an external hacker breaking in from the outside. But some of the most damaging incidents I've seen didn't start outside at all. They actually came from inside the organization. And when we say insider threats, we mean situations where an account with elevated permissions, like a backup admin or domain admin, is misused to delete, alter, change, or even exfiltrate the data. So now imagine you have a system admin, someone with legitimate access, deep knowledge of your infrastructure, networking, and the ability to make changes without raising suspicion. Maybe they have gone rogue after some internal conflict, or maybe their account has been compromised from the inside. They can move fast and the damage can be dramatic. So they log into the backup machine and, let's say, start by deleting configuration backups because those are really important. They disable or delete backup jobs. They can change retention policies. They can try to wipe out the recovery points. They might even alter or delete audit logs to cover their tracks, or maybe run some malicious jobs that override good backup data with some, let's say, encrypted junk. If MFA is in place, which is important, they might try to disable or reset it to ensure they can get back to the infrastructure. They can log in later on. Next, they can go after the repos directly, trying to break, trying to wipe out the backup data. And if those repositories are wide open, it's game over because they already have the access they need. And this is what makes insider threats so dangerous. They bypass many of the traditional defenses. The only real way to protect against them is to design backup infrastructure with separation of duties, with clear separation of duties, with immutability and isolation, so no single person, not even an admin, can destroy all of your backup data in one move. And now let's see at the layered controls that we have in Veeam Data Platform. We covered those a bit, but I will just dive a bit more. So here's the big question. How do we make sure that even someone with high level access can't destroy backups or weaken our security controls on their own? And that's where 4 eyes authorization comes in. So think of it like approving a high value financial transaction. So you can't just move a huge sum of money without a second confirmation. So you need a second person to confirm it. And here the large sum is your backup data. And the second confirmation is another admin, well, explicit approval. So with 4 eyes, any sensitive change like deleting backups, modifying repo settings, changing MFA, all of that requires the second approval. So no approval, no action. Simple as that. And the beauty of the control is that it forces collaboration on critical actions, on critical changes, and it greatly reduces the risk from both mistakes and malicious insiders. So even if an attacker manages to compromise one privileged account, they still don't have that second key to cause real damage or changes. Um, so let's walk through a couple of quick examples. So let's say a backup admin, maybe by mistake or with malicious intent, tries to delete a backup repo. With 4 eyes enabled, Veeam Data Platform flags that action and sends an approval request to another authorized admin, maybe a SO, a security administrator, a security officer, and until that second approval is given, nothing happens. Another situation, an attacker compromises an admin account and tries to delete all the backups. And again, they hit the 4 eyes. The request is stuck. It is waiting for approval by someone they can't reach and, well, hopefully can't compromise. So attack stop before a single backup is touched. The second layer is something really simple but incredibly powerful, and that is the principle of least privilege. The idea is straightforward. So every account gets only the permission it needs for its specific role and nothing more. So, for example, a backup operator responsible for, let's say, running backup jobs doesn't need the ability to delete or make some changes into the configuration of the backup repo or change, let's say, retention policy. And why does this matter? Because it limits the potential, well, blast radius if that account is compromised. So even if an attacker takes full control of that account. They can't reach systems or data or configuration outside of its assigned scope. So, well, in other words, less privilege means, well, less potential damage. The next layer is role separation. We covered that a little, and this comes through the new security officer role in the very next Veeam Data Platform release. And here is how it works. So the security officer can approve requests for, let's say, access elevation or other sensitive actions, but cannot initiate them. And they also have control over some critical operations like password resets, configuration recoveries, enabling lockdown mode, changing MFA, enabling HA, etc. So, and it is a clear separation of duties. So one person can request and another must approve. So, and that reduces the risk of privilege abuse. Next, we have advanced role-based access control. And again, this is coming in the very next Veeam Data Platform release, which is just around the corner. And this lets us define access scopes with surgical precision, not just for the backup infrastructure, but also for the production systems it protects. So, and the possibilities, the flexibility here is huge. You can create a custom role that allows someone to run backups but not perform recoveries. Or you can give access to just a single repo without opening the door to the entire environment for the DBA team, as an example. So it's about giving people exactly the access they need and nothing more and nothing they don't. And this kind of fine-grained control means users can do their jobs without having unnecessary access to their configurations they don't need to other parts of the system. And it is the principle of least privileged, enforced at the technical level, at the level of the appliance. And that makes a big difference. It reduces the attack surface and it limits the potential damage, whether it's intentional misuse or just plain human error. Because, well, access is a privilege and privilege should be earned, not just assumed by default. And of course, the prevention is on the one part of the story. So the other part is visibility, and we talked about the CM systems just a couple of slides ago. And Veeam One, as part of the Veeam Data Platform, gives us detailed logs for everything that matters, like recovery operations, configuration changes, permission modifications, you name it, with timestamps and the exact user details. So, well, in short, if something happens, we know exactly who did what and when. And well, honestly, the best part, all you need to do is just install Veeam One, which is part of the Veeam Data Platform. And finally, even if every other control fail, immutable backups remain the ultimate safeguard. So again, with single-use creds, virtual air gap through controlled ports, and SSH completely disabled, those backups simply can't be modified or deleted during that defined immutability window. And that means even a malicious insider with elevated permissions can't destroy your last line of defense. So to wrap it up, by combining all of these, like dual control, least privilege, role separation, detailed auditing, monitoring, and immutable backups, you get a layered defense that can mitigate even the insider threats, even if an attacker starts with high-level access. And now, let's jump to the next risk.
Thank you, Nikita. So, network-based lateral movement. I'm sorry. Actually, lateral movement is how small foothold can become a full-blown incident. Actually, attackers map the environment, escalate access, and pivot until they will reach critical systems. Um, the goal for to prevent this is a blast radius control. So if one segment of your network is compromised, the rest should be hard to reach and quick to detect. So, and what's important, all the actions that will be performed by attackers on the network should be detectable. That's highly, highly important. Again, after initial access, I'm sorry, after initial access, attackers probably will enumerate credentials, available shares, management consoles, and they will try to find quickest road to high value systems, like, for example, your business critical systems or backups, and so on. They will use common tools like PowerShell, Bash, WMI, RDP, and other remote protocols like SSH, Telnet probably, and so on. So in ideal world, all of this should be locked, and we should follow the least privilege principle, as Nikita already explained. Additionally, weak segmentation of your network can help them a lot. And actually, your network can act like express lane when the single compromise can turn into enterprise problem. What can we do here to make it much more difficult for attackers to reach to high value parts of your environment? So the first thing that comes to mind, that's segmentation, of course. We have a lot of these on our best practices guide. And actually, it's kind of simple. And I really believe that a lot of you already have this implemented because that's a sort of like a de facto standard already. But still, to those who not yet done with this segmentation like this, so it's really, really worth spend your time on this because this will make things, this will, let's say, bump your security to a little bit higher level. And I can say it's not only about making your separate zones a little bit more secure, it makes all the actions auditable. And that's super important. Again, how to segment your network? Actually, you can do this in the way you really need this because uh, for every single organization, there will be an ideal way how you should separate your services, how you can, if you will allow some of them to reach to other, and so on. So actually, this should be quite unique. The main principle, uh, kind of simple. So actually, there should be dedicated backup environment, backup segment. There should be dedicated management segment, and there should be a number of trusted or semi-trusted or maybe untrusted applications. For example, you can use untrusted segment for to put their firewalls, let's say reverse proxies, VPN gateways, etc. And of course, in your trusted segments, there should be backup appliance, for example. There should be repositories, maybe some additional services, whatever. It can be anything you want to, but it should follow the principle where you have trusted and untrusted um, uh, services and roles within these separated segments. What's important here, to communicate from one segment to another, all the traffic should pass through firewall, router, whatever. Like it should be in controlled way, and you can define uh, what traffic should you allow and what traffic shouldn't be, let's say, passed from one side to another one. For example, you can define that some of the segments are able to respond only, like they will not be able to initiate connection from one segment to another one, but they will be able to respond on some requests from another segment. So it allows you to make your network quite, let's say, flexible, but at the same time, it should be much more secure than without segmentation. So flat network is not something that I would recommend to anyone, actually. Um, okay, what else? This approach really synergizes perfectly with active detection tools like XDR, extended uh, detection and response, and EDR, endpoint detection and response. Also, it's really nice to have some sort of honeypots. Honeypots mean that you can create a network attached device, virtual device, for example, that will be able to detect any port scans, any vulnerability scans, and it will raise an alert to your monitoring system to, let's say, to make sure you're aware about this. So altogether, if you will combine this with the segmentation and active threat detection tools like XDR, EDR, it should work quite well in a synergy. What else? For some organizations, this can be a really nice compliance enable because if you really want to make sure that you are following the recommendation and best practices, that's something that should be implemented all the time. Like there is no way that you can, let's say, you will be compliant without implementing your network segmentation. Actually, that's bread and butter, and you cannot start without it. Okay, regarding the additional moments, additional bullets we should keep in mind besides network segmentation. It's really important to use encrypted communication. By default, Veeam will use TLS certificates. That's a self-signed certificates, and they are quite enough for almost everything. But if you really want to have additional controls, like for example, you really want to be able to revoke certificate at some point in time, for some reason, you can switch to external certificate authority. So that's up to you. Additionally, it's really nice to use MFA. We already discussed this multiple times, so I will not repeat again. We can use external KMS, so to rotate your keys. That's also important because we have a lot of customers who really not really um, worried about changing the keys. So and they can use the same key for years, and that's not something that aligned with the best practices. Of course, keys should be rotatable, and using external KMS system would be a nice addition to your security. For ICE, again, Nikita covered this in details. Role-based access control, again, was covered by Nikita. That's really a nice thing, and it should be implemented all the time. So least privileges, that's super important. And just follow what you will receive from best practices and compliance analyzer. Like, for example, don't join the domain, etc. So actually, that's a sort of like a basic things you should use for hardening your environment and to prevent network-based lateral movement as much as you can. And of course, the last but the most important, it's highly important to use monitoring tools. Like if you have Veeam Advanced, you can use Veeam One. You can use external monitoring tools. Use of them because without them, you're like you're like blind actually, and you should understand what exactly happening in your backup environment, in your network environment, and only by combining all these things together, you will have a full picture of your security state, like where you are, what exactly wrong, what you are doing right, and it should be reiterated again and again. Like you should test it by yourself. It's important to be sure that in case of any breach, you will be alerted about this. At least if they will do some obvious stuff like port scanning, for example, or trying to log in via MFA, and let's say they tried already multiple times, and MFA, let's say, raised an alert about this and so on. Actually, it's really important to have a visibility into your environment. And the last slide for this topic, that's about shadow IT. I know that if you are into this, at least a bit, that's a curse. Like it's nearly impossible to win this fight completely and forever because the shadow IT will re-emerge again. And what can we do to make it easier? And why should we fight shadow IT? Actually, shadow IT is a set of unsanctioned tools that can create blind pathways. And what's important, they don't go through approved controls or logging. So actually, even if you have all the monitoring systems implemented and you configured it quite well, if your users will use something that wasn't approved, um, probably this will be still around your controls. So it will not be detectable. It will not be locked. Uh, so the actions will not be locked by your systems and so on. And actually, shadow IT used quite often by attackers because they can move um, quite silently by using shadow IT because they can use file syncing, they can use let's say they can transfer some files by using let's say tools that are in use by shadow IT by users and so on. So actually, one recommendation about this, just make it easier for users to do the right thing. Like, for example, offer sanctioned alternatives and fast approvals path. So your users not going around and not trying to build their own AT environment, like by using alternative ways, like file shares. I mean, cloud-based file sharing, etc. So it's super important. So just keep this in mind because that's something that you can let's say solve instantly. This will take some time, but there's a ways how you can improve this a lot. Okay, Nikita, stage is yours.
Awesome. Let's move on to another modern and, well, very dangerous risk, and that is data poisoning. Um, just a sec. Yeah. So, unlike ransomware, which, well, simply encrypts or deletes backups, data poisoning works completely different. Its goal is to stealthily corrupt the data, either in production before it is backed up or directly inside your backup repos. And, well, the idea is simple but dangerous. So, when you recover the data, you are actually recovering, well, let's say, compromised, manipulated, or even malicious data, effectively reinfecting your production environment. And the real challenge is that poisoning can be incredibly hard to detect because your backup job may complete successfully. The CRC check may match, and everything might look perfectly fine until you recover the data. Let's break down how those attacks actually happen. So, um, our very first backup is completely clean. It is verified, healthy, and ready for recovery. And this is our known good state, the clean green baseline that we can trust. Then a security breach occurs, and the threat actor gains access to, let's say, to a production virtual machine or a physical machine, maybe through stolen creds, unpatched vulnerability, compromised admin workstation, you name it. But instead of launching a noisy and destructive attack, they go and they call it low and slow, making really small incremental changes over time. So, for example, modifying just a few financial records each day, or maybe tweaking a couple of database entries. So maybe slowly changing some configuration files or adjusting application parameters in the background. So those can be different. And because these changes are minimal and spread out over time, they don't trigger alarms. And each new backup now contains just a little more poisoned data than the last. So if we only test the latest backup, we might miss that the poisoning started much earlier, which means recovery might bring the attacker's manipulations right back into the production. And this is why Veeam Data Platform uses two key features to detect these attacks, and those are the virtual lab and the data integration API. And by using those tools regularly and not just on your newest backup, you can pinpoint exactly when the corruption began and identify your last clean recovery point. So if data poisoning can creep in slowly and hide inside multiple backups, how do we actually spot it and, more importantly, find the last clean recovery point? And we got the answer. Those are the virtual lab and the data integration API. So the virtual lab is basically a clean room. It is a fully isolated sandbox where we can boot backups without any risk to production. It is powered by Sure Backup Jobs, and these do much more than just start the virtual machine. They verify that core services, things like databases, AD, mail services, application endpoints, are running and behaving correctly. And they can even run some custom scripts, some custom validation scripts. For example, querying a SQL database for no known values, checking directory object counts, or testing web application responses. So it's up to you. if any of these checks return some, let's say, unexpected results, that's an early indicator of possible data poisoning. And because all of that happens in an isolation, we can test multiple recovery points, all of our recovery points, not just the latest one, to identify exactly when the corruption began. And number two, the data integration API. Um, and that complements the virtual lab by letting us mount the backup data without performing a full recovery. And that unlocks some really advanced workflows like running malware scans, performing data mining or analytics, comparing data sets one by one, side by side with a trusted baseline to identify some modifications or data drifts. So together, Virtual Lab and the Data Integration API gives us two layers of detection. So the first one is functional testing, and the second one is deep data inspection. So one validates that the system, the application, the landscape, well, behaves correctly in a live boot in an isolation, and the other allows us like forensic level analysis on the backup raw data. And this combination lets you not only detect that poisoning has occurred, but also find the last clean recovery point with confidence. So now let's look under the hood and see how Sure Backup works to detect issues, okay, like data poisoning. So we start with backup files stored in the repo. So ideally on a hardened repo with immutability, so we know they haven't been changed after the creation. Sure Backup instructs the hypervisor to spin up those virtual machines or physical machines, by the way, because we have inbuilt P2V conversion directly from the backup file. You don't need a full recovery. And for that, we're using the Veeam Instant Recovery technology. Next, those machines, those workloads are booted inside an isolated network. We call it virtual lab. So there is zero risk to production. And inside that sandbox, Sure Backup runs a full suite of tests like heartbeat test, network tests, application test, malware scan, Yara scan, CRC check, and custom scripts. And those lets you run your own checks, for example, checking critical database tables or verifying security policy files. And if any of those checks fail, like in this example where one workload, one virtual machine shows a red X, we know there is a potential, well, integrity or security issue with that backup. And once testing is done, Sure Backup creates a detailed report showing exactly which test passed or failed and for which recovery points. And that gives us clear evidence for compliance. And more importantly, it tells us which backups are safe to recover from and which needs to be, let's say, put in quarantine mode for later investigation. So all right, let's imagine we're running a live verification of our backups just to make sure they haven't been poisoned. And this is the Sure Backup job configuration. Here I'm linking it to the backup job for our AD domain controllers. Well, that's a critical workload where even a small data poisoning could have a huge impact. On the left, you can see the verification options, and I'm selecting the exact roles and tests I want to run, like DNS server check to, let's say, to ensure DNS responds correctly, domain controller tests to test the recovery modes for DC, global catalog validation. And once I click OK and start the job, Sure Backup does the following. So again, we're launching that workload, again, physical or virtual, directly from the backup file. We boot it up in an isolated virtual lab network, so there is zero impact on production. And we run the role-specific tests. So for example, in that case, we query the database, the AD database for consistency. We check the replication metadata. We validate the FSMO role presence. And optionally, we can run some custom PowerShell scripts to check maybe specific objects or group policies, etc. On top of that, we can add like a CRC check, malware scan, Yara scan inside that workload to validate integrity and check optionally for malware ransomware. And when that finishes, I have a detailed report listing every test its result and the recovery point that was tested. So if, again, if even one test fails, for example, if a directory object count doesn't match the green baseline, that's a red flag for possible data poisoning. Um, but sometimes, especially with data poisoning, that's not enough. We need to go deeper. We need to inspect the raw backup without actually recovering those. And that's where the Veeam Data Integration API comes in. So how it works. Um, So from Vim Backup and Replication UI, I can pick a recovery point and use the Data Integration API to mount it. The backup data is accessed directly from the repo in read-only mode, so there is no way I can accidentally change it or delete it. And the mount operation is handled by a mount server, that is a Vim role, which presents the backup data to the operating system. So on Windows, the mounted volume appears through iSCSI under a path like C vimflr. On Linux or Unix operating systems, it is mounted through the Fuse protocol into directories like TMP. And once it is mounted, any external tool can read the backup data directly. And that's where the possibilities open up. So uh, we can mine data from backups. We can run analytics or classification scripts to identify maybe some sensitive information. We can point forensic tools to search for IOC for indicators of compromise. We can run malware scans with the latest AV signatures or Yara rules that Pavel covered to detect some dormant threats. We can even go to do some compliance work like e-discovery or GDPR. And for machine learning teams, it's a way to train models on historical data. And definitely we can compare backup content against a trusted green baseline to detect any modifications. And in a poisoning investigation, this is a game changer because, again, we can mount multiple recovery points side by side, run automated diff scripts or forensic scans, and identify exactly when the data started to drift from its clean green baseline, and all without recovering a single byte into the production environment. So the how it looks like in the UI. So the data integration API is essentially a programmatic backend for the publish disks function that you can see right here in the Veeam UI on the right. And when you click publish disks, Veeam mounts the content of a backup so they can be accessed. So think of it as a presenting the disks to another system for inspection. And here you can see that I have selected a Proxmox backup for file01 virtual machine. And in the context menu, there is publish disks option. So if I do this manually, it is perfect for ad hoc analysis, some kind of a quick investigation. But with PowerShell, we can turn this into a repeatable process. So like, for example, every Friday, mount last week's backups of critical workloads, run automated SQL integrity checks and malware scans, and if any anomalies are detected, we can flag those recovery points that we don't want to use them, those for longer term retention. We don't want to promote those to longer term retention, and some additional investigation is required. So to wrap it up, to wrap up data poisoning, we start with immutable storage, okay, to protect backups from post-creation changes, from post-creation tampering. We use Sure Backup and virtual labs to validate both the recoverability of the workloads of applications and functional integrity. Then we leverage the data integration API for deep analysis. And finally, we automate those. So detection becomes continuous but not occasional. And well, we can stop and detect data poisoning, but that's only one piece of the puzzle. If the environment itself, is vulnerable, attackers will always find another way. And that's why our next chapter is generic environment vulnerabilities. Pavel, over to you.
Thank you, Nikita. So, regarding this topic, Actually, many incidents are happening due to everyday gaps, like weak configs, missed patches, too broad permissions, and actually not from exotic zero-day vulnerabilities. You can think about your security in layers. We'll cover this a little bit later, but just imagine that you have a multiple layers like onion. Like you have a human layer, perimeter layer, network layer, endpoint devices layer, application layer, and so on. And weakness in any layer can break the chain. That is so important to understand. So actually, it's important to make your continuous hardening part um, like standard for your operations. You should always check what exactly probably could go wrong and try to fix it as soon as possible. Actually, attackers will always look for the easiest path. So let's say one poorly protected system can open the door for lateral movement to everything else. And there is a common mistake. A lot of people really overinvesting in one area and leaving others quite exposed. So it should be more balanced. Like uh, you should harden your security equally across all the layers if possible. So actually, let's see these layers. The first one obviously will be a human layer. So most breaches are happening there because let's say humans can let's say can be exploited by phishing, social engineering. They are tend to use weaker passwords to be able to remember them, right? So actually, that's the weakest spot. Next layer is your perimeter security layer. This is like a external fence, external walls of your organization. So here you can strictly define what is allowed to enter and what is not. Next one, that's a network security layer. We already discussed lateral movement. So actually, that's a highway from your external walls to the core of your organization. So actually, you should state this highly with high importance because it's so important to segment your network, to follow least applicable permissions strategy, and so on. Something wrong. So next one, the endpoint security layer. This means every device, personal laptop, server, mobile phone, is a potential entry point. So again, we are not covering endpoint security in depth here, so it's not really about this at all. But you should keep in mind that is also additional weak spot where you should focus just to make sure that the breach will not happen because of them. So that's important. So again, network segmentation to the eight. Always group these devices in a separate network segment. Maybe split them into multiple network segments, and of course, do not allow them to talk to. Let's say business critical systems because there is no need in this. So if you need any kind of portal to interact with for your users, you can create additional layers. Like for example, you can use reverse proxies. You can use authorization mechanisms to understand who exactly should access what, and so on. Actually, it's possible to organize this in a secure manner, but it will require some time, of course, and some effort. Next one, application security layer. That's so important as well because applications are frequent targets for attackers, and that's also about in-time patching and let's say following the releases of new versions and fix vulnerabilities and so on. Actually, that's all about it. Just um, be aware about the new exploits, new vulnerabilities, follow, let's say, subscribe to the news, security lists, and so on. Actually, this is also important. Data security layer, that's about stealing your data. We already discussed it quite well. So when we're talking about any breaches, one of the most common parts of attack will be data exfiltration. So actually you have to encrypt your data at rest, in flight, so actually everywhere. And of course, store your data securely in different places, just to make sure that, let's say, you can recover. That's not about stealing the data, but still, it's so important to be able to preserve your data in the way it can help you, like following 3-to-1 rule covered by Nikita, using immutability just to make sure you will be able to restore from certain backup, certain restore point, and so on. And the last one, and the most important one, that's your mission critical assets layer. So that's about business critical systems. So if attacker really want to hurt your organization, that's the obvious target. Like that will be the target number one for them, and the backups. So actually to prevent the restoration of these mission critical services. That's how it looks like. Uh, on a side note, this is not a sort of like a standardized and let's say widely accepted structure of layers, but it still makes a lot of sense because it's much easier to understand all of this by using this approach rather than let's say just naming the layers one after another and thinking what exactly we should prioritize over other. So that's how it could be understand it a little bit easier than just like a list with the priorities. Again, we are talking about backups mostly, but let's imagine that you have a new server. You are, let's say, configuring for any kind of role, you name it. And would you really change the default credentials? I hope, and I suppose everyone will answer yes. That's the most obvious one. So you should never leave like admin or admin password or let's say something as a login credentials by default. You should change it all, of course, right from the very beginning. Next question to ask yourself, would you configure the logging to external monitoring system? I suppose not everyone will answer yes. Of course, it's it's expected behavior just because it's, let's say, it's nice to have external logging systems, but I know that smaller companies are tending not to have it uh, all the time. And that's something that you can start working on, for example, because now you already understand that it's important to have centralized monitoring system and logging system, because only by having it, you can be sure that you really see the what's happening in your environment. There is no other way, unfortunately. You can use sealed different, let's say, monitoring tools, but it wouldn't give you the same level of understanding what's happening, unfortunately. So it's highly important again. Are you going to update all the firmware and do this, let's say, from time to time? As we already know, it's highly important to follow the um, security lists and to understand where some patches were released just to prevent some vulnerabilities, to prevent the breaches and so on. Actually, it's highly important to do again. When you're purchasing any hardware, most likely it will be shipped to you with outdated firmware. Like sometimes it's not that old, but sometimes it can be even years behind the. So you should patch it definitely. So there is no other way if you want to do it in a secure manner. Would you ensure that management interfaces of these new server added to isolated network? Like, for example, as we already discussed, you can have multiple different segments of your network. And it's important to keep all the um, management interfaces in a separated and restricted network to not allow anyone access, let's say, your IPMI, ILO, etc. So actually, I believe you should understand why it's important, because if someone will gain an access to it, and especially if you haven't changed your default credentials, that it's obviously that this person can ruin everything because he or she will have, let's say, full access and can do whatever they want to. Okay, this one is a little bit tricky because would you disable unused ports and interfaces? That's not only about server, actually. That it should be combined with physical security of your server room or data center. And of course, that works for both ends. Like it works for endpoint device like server and for switches as well. I cannot say that this will be a huge obstacle in terms if we will have, let's say, bad guy inside your data room, a server room, I'm sorry, a server room. And of course, it's already quite bad. But still, this can take some more time. This will give you some more time to be notified about presence of the bad guy there. So actually, it's not the worst thing you can do. Actually, why not? So if it helps even a little bit, why not? This is something that we are quite rare see um, in our customers doing. So actually, a lot of customers just, let's say, leave it as is. But in fact, you should disable outdated legacy protocols like Telnet without any encryption, like HTTP as well. Let's say protocols with known vulnerabilities like NTLM. Just disable them if it's possible from user interface or command line, and leave only the most secure, like SSH, HTTPS, etc. So that's a sort of like a really, really nice thing to have, but not every single device can offer this ability to you, like to disable, enable everything you want to. And the last one, regarding the server, would you follow the hardening baseline? So that's a sort of thing that almost no one really following, unfortunately. But if you really want to build secure environment, especially when it comes to your backups or mission critical services, it's really important to follow the best practices and recommendations of, let's say, established um, strategies, like, for example, DSST or NIS2, etc. So just try to do it once. It's not that difficult. It's not that time consuming. It's really worth it. But you have to be sure that once you will start doing this, you can expand it later. Like you can, for example, you can start small and then you can add when you will be adding new servers, new devices, new hardware. You can also try to implement all these best practices you already implemented for specific zones, like for example, backups and mission critical services, to everything else. So actually, that's a good one. Okay, then think about your environment in general. The first question, probably that's not the major problem for smaller companies, but when it comes to large organizations, that's kind of popular issue. When was the last time you reviewed the list of admins for dormant or ghost accounts? I mean, ghost admin accounts. That's important because it can be used by the bad guys, as we already know. Another question: uh, how many active firewall configurations allowing more than you really need? Like, for example, you can check by default, it should be always deny any, and only higher priority rules should allow some specific protocols, like, for example, UDP or TCP, some specific ports or port ranges, and some specific source and destination IP addresses. So that's the right way how the things should be organized in the network world. But if you see any number of allow any rules, that probably means that something is a little bit less restrictive than it should be. So probably a need to review your security network policies because that's not how it should be in a secure environment. Okay, next one. Have you ever run a port scanner or maybe just a device IP scanner from any untrusted or semi-trusted network? Like, for example, you can do this from your end users network, for example. Just try to scan your IP range with your servers or backup devices. And what's important here? It's not even enough just, let's say, if you will have nothing, like all the ports are closed and no IPs are, let's say, reachable via ICMP request. No, it's important to have a notification about this action. So you should be notified that some person, some device scanning your environment. And that's probably even the more important than just, let's say, not having ability to scan something. So about monitoring again, again, and again. So monitoring is crucial. Um, do you use any operating systems that are end of life state? Actually, I believe at least some of you will answer yes, because it's a common thing. Actually, just imagine that, let's say, Windows Server 2012, 2012 R2, older Ubuntu LTS releases like 18.004, CentOS 7. It's like it sounds like it was these recent operating systems are not that old, but they are already in the end of life state. And if you're not, for example, paying for extended security maintenance for Ubuntu, you will not receive any security updates for 18.04. For example, like Debian 9 and 10, again, already out of support. So just remember that if you have such systems, you most likely you will have a breaches in your environment, especially if they are externally facing. Like for example, you are using them to run some web services or maybe reverse proxy or whatever. Like if they are externally exposed, you are at risk because these systems are not maintained in terms of security anymore. So please keep an eye on this. That's super important. And again, about monitoring. How long ago did you simulate a security event? Like, for example, invalid login, privilege escalation, whatever, like trying to, let's say, enter MFA wrongly multiple times in Veeam. Will this be logged by your monitoring system? If not, maybe there is something you should um, rethink about how it's organized. Um, and probably almost the last one. Have you ever had a security training for your employees? What about, let's say, simulated real-time event, like, for example, some phishing email or social engineering test? So actually, that's super important. In Veeam, we have this on regular basis, the trainings, the testing as well. So it's really highly recommended to do it regularly because you cannot really predict what will be the behavior of your employees without training them, without explaining to them how it's important to stay secure and not to follow links from unknown senders and so on. And the last, that's actually not the last bullet, but that's a group of everything else. So think about Wi-Fi. What kind of encryption you are using and authentication method? Like, for example, you can use open network. So that means that every byte of your traffic goes unencrypted, unless it's encrypted by something else, like, for example, HTTPS or something else. But there's a chance that some application will send the data over your Wi-Fi in unencrypted way. So how you can improve this. Physical security, we already touched this briefly. So it's super important to combine physical security and let's say security in the IT world. Like you should do both of this. It's not enough to just, let's say, to have the best in class backup solution. For example, you are following all the best practices, you're use base hardening baselines, but at the same time, your server room is not locking properly, or you don't have a let's say surveillance cam or something like this. Think about endpoint hardening. Like for example, if your users are, let's say, are able to use third-party, let's say, storage cloud or VPN services or whatever. Think about clouds. So if it's safe to store your data in, let's say, some unknown cloud storage repository, or maybe, let's say, you want to improve your, let's say, security by replicating your data, where your data will be held and, let's say, in a year. So if you will replicate it, how you will confirm that your data is safe and would not be stolen, if it's encrypted or not in the clouds. So actually a lot of questions. And start small, as again, like start with something that obvious to you. Uh, but of course, later on, you can expand on this and you can make it more and more secure. Back to Nikita.
Thank you. Well, actually, all those questions are extremely important, and each of us can use this list as an just as an action plan. And we still have the final risk, recovery and orchestration failures. So, in backup and disaster recovery, creating a copy of your data is just the first step in a much bigger challenge, because the real test is whether you can recover the data quickly, accurately, and at scale when everything is, going wrong. So, because in the real incident, the clock is ticking, the systems, the applications are down, people are waiting, and well, every minute costs money, or even your reputation, or both. And this is where your backup strategy either proves itself or fails when you need it most. And here's the truth: many organizations think they're ready to recover until the day they actually have to. And that's when they find out that the recovery plan hasn't been updated for years. The documentation is incomplete or outdated. The people who knew the process have left the company, or maybe the orchestration scripts failed because they were never tested. So on this slide, you will see a simplified flow of a typical recovery attempt and the points where it tends to go wrong. So it starts with a recovery operator, restore operator, the person who actually kicks off the recovery process. That might be a system admin, application owner, or somebody from the DR team. And the restore operator connects to the backup machine, selects a restore point from backup or replica. But if your recovery point objective are not well defined or backups are not frequent enough, your latest clean point might already be too old to be useful. And then comes the DR workflow without automation. It's full of manual steps like mapping networks, adjusting resources, reconfiguring application dependencies, you name it. And every manual action is just another chance for human error, and especially under time pressure. Under time pressure, those chances they multiply really fast. So okay, we finally have our virtual machine booted, and this is where reality hits. Maybe the data inside is already corrupted or incomplete because the the backup was never verified before job completed successfully. We're not using virtual labs. We're not using sure backups. Maybe the virtual machine fails to start because of some software incompatibility, like okay, recovering a database to a server missing some critical patches or drivers. And all of that could have been avoided with automated verification and pre-built orchestration plans. So on this slide, you can see what a well-designed recovery and orchestration process looks like during normal operations, like before a disaster happens. So we start in the main data center. So our production workloads are running, and Veeam Data Platform is doing a couple of things. So it is creating regular backups, and these are verified copies of our workloads stored in the local backup repository, immutable repository. Then it is replicating our critical virtual machine to the DR side. And that means we have ready to start copies of your most important workloads using snapshot based replication or continuous data protection. Um, and those workloads sitting on the disaster recovery side waiting to be powered on instantly if something goes wrong with the primary side. And at the same time, backups are being sent to the DR side through backup copy jobs. You remember the 3-2-1 rule? And this adds another layer of protection. So even if the primary side and all of its local backups are gone, we still have clean, recoverable copies offsite. And if we store those backup copies with immutability, on top of that, they can't be changed or deleted during the defined period, no matter what happens. And the beauty of this approach is that replication and backup copies work together. Replication gives us speed, and the backup copies give you history. Now in the DR side, we have Veeam Recovery Orchestrator, and that is part of the Veeam Data Platform. This is the point where we move from just having copies to knowing they will work. So, and here at the DR side, the backups are tested and scanned for malware and anomalies before they, let's say, approved for recovery. And the same we do with the replicas. They are tested. We start those in an isolated network, confirming that they can boot, and the application inside function exactly as expected. And well, the point is, we're not waiting for a disaster to find out if recovery works. We're testing that in advance, regularly, automatically, and that means when disaster strikes, recovery is not a guesswork anymore. It is a tested run book, a tested playbook. So now let's see what happens when the disaster strikes. So here is our primary DC. It's completely offline, completely off limits. It could be a fire, a power outage, a ransomware incident, you name it. At this point, production is down and the clock on the recovery time objective is ticking. So in the secondary location, Veeam Recovery Orchestrator takes over with the operator in charge. So for critical workloads, the orchestrator powers on the replicas, and those are pre-configured with the correct resources, with network mappings and application dependencies. And that means near instant failover. So we're talking minutes, not hours here. For systems that were not replicated, we're launching instant recovery directly from the backup repos. So those workloads, again, virtual or physical, they start directly from the backup repo. The data streams in from the backup file in the background, and the users can get back to work without waiting for a full recovery. And, and as each system comes online, the test scripts kick in. We can check the database connectivity, we can verify application responses, confirming directory services, everything. And that is literally the difference between scrambling during a disaster and executing a pre-approved and automated runbook or playbook. All right, so before any disaster happens, the real work actually starts right here, and that is the Veeam Recovery Orchestrator UI. You need to create the plan. So first, we define our recovery objectives. That's our recovery time and recovery point objective. Recovery time objective is how quickly a system needs to be back online. Recovery point objective is how much data you can afford to lose. And here's the important part. These numbers have to match business requirements, not just what IT thinks is reasonable. Next, we map our applications, their dependencies, and the infrastructure components they rely on. Why? Well, because bringing up a database without its authentication service, or let's say starting an ERP system without the file share it depends on, is just pointless. Because the plan has to ensure uh, complete recovery coverage. Each piece of the puzzle has to be in place. And then on top of that, we can add some validation steps if we need those. And that means when the recovery runs, it's not just power on the virtual machine. It checks if service is running, verify the application, and confirms the data integrity as well. Um, and here is what it looks like inside Veeam Recovery Orchestrator UI. So you can see different recovery plans here, recovering to DR site, recovering to Azure, some replication plans for VMware, for Hyper-V, and each has a status showing when it was last verified and whether it passed all the checks. So, and the key thing is here, when we hit that big red button for failover, to launch the recovery plan, we have already practiced it on the exact systems with the exact steps and with the exact validations we need in a real disaster. Okay, so we have the plan. But a plan is only as good as its last test. So that's why the next recommendation is validate and test. That's a very important phase. And you can run those. You can run automated recovery verification tests in a completely isolated environment with Veeam Recovery Orchestrator. So you can boot your workload directly from backups or replicas, walk through the recovery process, and check that everything works without ever touching the production. So it's kind of the exact same process we'd follow in a real disaster, just without the risk. And after each run, we get a validation report that shows success rates, lists exactly which steps passed or failed. It flags potential issues that need fixing and tells us whether the recovery point met our recovery point objective. That is really important as well. And those reports are not just for IT, they're gold for compliance teams, for external auditors, for management and application owners. Why? Well, because those reports prove that we can recover. And here's the key: testing is not a one time checkbox. You can schedule these validation, let's say, exercises regularly so your readiness is always up to date. If something changes in the environment, a new application dependency, patch, network reconfiguration will catch it before it slows you down in a real incident. And on the screen, you can see an example test run in Orchestrator. It verifies the location, checks the repo, confirms a valid recovery point, then runs recovery and records the exact timing for each step. So, and while the green means we're ready to go, no surprises. Um, so when we talk about avoiding recovery and orchestration failure, so just to wrap it up, it's not just about having backups. It's about having tested, timed, and documented recovery workflow that we know will work. And with this process running continuously, we can walk into any disaster scenario with confidence. And well, before we wrap up, I want to leave you with a set of resources you can use to go deeper into, well, everything we discussed today. First, Veeam Backup and Replication Security Best Practice Guide. This is your go-to document for hardening your backup infrastructure. It covers architecture, access control, immutability, everything you need to build a secure foundation. Next, the Veeam Security Knowledge Base article list. And that's a collection of KBs with known vulnerabilities, patches, and recommendations. Basically, a quick way to make sure you're not missing anything critical. Then there is the Ransomware Trends and Proactive Strategies report. That is a fresh, research-driven insight into how ransomware attacks are evolving nowadays and what strategies are most effective right now. We also have the Veeam Cyber Secure program. Well, a framework and set of services to help you improve your cyber resilience with assessments, workshops, and tailored guidance. For learning, there is Veeam University Free and Veeam University Pro, both full of training videos, labs, and certification paths to build your skills. And if you want to get hands-on, check out the Veeam Hands-On Labs, a safe, pre-built environment where you can test features and workflows in real time. So today we have covered a lot of ground, but while security and coverage are living processes, they evolve as threats and technology change. So these resources will help you stay ahead, keep your knowledge sharp, and make sure your backup and recovery strategy is, always ready for the next challenge, for what's coming next. And with that, thank you for your time. Thank you for your attention. I hope you live today not just with new knowledge, but with a clear plan, for how to apply it. Thank you.
Thank you.